Dominoes.
Let's go. We gonna let it go, say we gonna let it go, we gonna let it go now, yeah. We gonna get it now, live in the moment, yeah. We gonna let it go now, yeah. We gonna let it go, say we gonna let it go, we gonna let it go now, yeah. We gonna get it now, live in the moment, yeah. We gonna let it go, yeah. Say hello, take a break, just let it go. Clear your mind, feel the glow of your halo. Say hello to the day, so come on, let's go. Come on, let's go.
Dominoes.
Say hello, we got time, we can find our flow. Break the rules, I'ma let you go solo. Say hello to your life, so come on, let's go. Come on, let's go. Dominoes. Let's go.
Dominoes.
Let's go.
Dominoes.
We gonna let it go, say we gonna let it go, we gonna let it go now, yeah. We gonna get it now, live in the moment, yeah. We gonna let it go now. Dominoes.
Hey guys, welcome to the Starting Million Show. I'm your host Asher Ao. Welcome. So, this time round, okay, I'm because of we are all still going through this COVID pandemic, and I so invited a friend of mine. He actually reached out, so we kind of had a little bit of a chat, and we want to talk a little bit about a very important thing, which is the mental well-being, because it's pretty much everything is all a mental game, right? It's all mental. So basically I'm going to be asking my guest that's upcoming in a while some certain questions, but he has actually taught over 500,000 different people, which I'll introduce him in a bit while. So while I thought this topic was pretty important, is because it's all a mental game. How we take care of our brain, how what's going on inside the brain is also very, very important. And you can see the physical brain, right? But you what goes inside all the electrical signals and whatnot, that translates into something else for us as human beings. So I'm going to ask him a little bit about, how do we're going to ask him a little for today is what exactly trauma is. Okay, I'm also going to ask him a little bit about how do we handle our own, someone else's trauma, and at what point should one really, seek for help, right? So that's what I'm going to ask him about. So if you happen to be watching together with me, leave a hashtag comment live, or if you're watching this on replay, just leave a hashtag replay so that I know you're watching on a replay. All right. So without further ado, let's get this party started.
You cut me loose and set me free. You cut me loose. You make me win in every way. Win in every way. You show me how to spread my wings. Yes, I'm the winner of the day. You cut me loose and set me free. You make me win in every way.
So my guest, Stuart Tan, has been a psychologist and a therapist since 1998. He's working behind the scenes to support people by developing their mental capacity through psychological principles and neuro-linguistic programming to achieve the goals they want in life. As a highly sought-after international coach and speaker, and having taught over 500,000 people worldwide, he has seen how some coping strategies are ineffective, and he aims to get the message out to people who need better wellness strategies. He has also worked with organizations such as the Health Promotion Board to teach organizations about mental well-being, and the Academy of Singapore Teachers to support self-care practices. So, without further ado, allow me to introduce and bring onto the screen my friend, Stuart Tan. Welcome, Stuart.
Hey, Asher, good to be on, man. Very snazzy video intro there. I like the energy. Yeah, it kind of keeps your mental energy up.
Definitely, it keeps me alive. So it's like sometimes we feel a little bit tired. Once I hear the music, okay, it's time to go, time to roll.
Yeah.
So Mark, thank you for joining in live from London. Thank you for coming
Hey,
in as
Mark.
well. All right. So Stuart, I think for you, for a lot of people know you already. So you've actually spoken to at least 500,000 people. I'm making my way there, but for the benefit of those who haven't heard of you yet, okay, so perhaps we can just get started, because I know there's there's a lot of things that's going on in there. There's a lot of electrical signals. So if we were to measure people by electrical signals, I could probably have a battery. Yours is probably like enough for a whole building. So so if we were to compare that, so perhaps maybe just maybe. Oh, okay. And so humble. All right. So perhaps get everyone to know a little bit about yourself, right? That's a little bit about yourself and just your background, so we can get to know you.
Sure. It was not too long ago. Actually, it's quite a long time ago. The reason why I've spoken to so many people is largely because I'm getting ancient, I guess. Over 500,000 people, and I wasn't counting actually, but there was a company sometime in 2013. They wanted me to highlight my testimonials and records and track record. So I kind of listed everything down because I got to a point where I was a bit frustrated, right? I still have to prove myself in spite of the fact that I've been in the industry for such a long time. But it dawned on me that this is really the kind of outreach that we aim for and the kind of expectations that we might have of the world in general. Not everybody knows you. And even if they do know you, it's always nice to know a little bit more. So aside from being a psychotherapist, psychologist, NLP, like go-to person in Asia, actually, a lot of people might be surprised that I'm also a musician. So I'm a keyboardist musician. I compose my own songs. I say I like to compose, otherwise I'll decompose. Literally it's just one of my methods of unwinding, making sure that I keep myself sane. I'm just the person who's been so ridiculously ravenous about the knowledge about the mind, and it primarily started when I was much younger. I wasn't very smart, I would say. I just didn't know enough, and it made me feel ashamed that these guys know so much, and then they're getting better scores than me in school. So I was kind of like that kind of an introvert. So over time, I began to expand my knowledge base, and I wasn't aiming to be famous. I wasn't aiming to do like become a rock star or anything like that. But I eventually ended up having the capacity to treat people, to empathize with them, because I could see a part of me in them. That those guys who've gone through trauma, have gone through depression and all that, I could see that part of me in them. And it made me a little bit more empathetic to the challenges that they're facing. And as with life, we all go through ups and downs, right? To name a cliche. But the truth is that we have to, and it's a journey of recognizing what kinds of meanings we've created. So I used to think that I was shy, introverted, didn't want to interact, didn't want to network, and so on and so forth. In fact, the idea of networking terrified me. The idea of public speaking terrified me. So today it's very different. And if anything, I think it's just a testament to the fact that human beings are malleable, we are flexible, we are adaptable. We may face difficult moments, but we aren't difficult people. And I think that's important to make a distinction of. So when I was running training and I was specializing in training, it was easier to just stand on stage and deliver a message rather than to sit down one-on-one with individuals. Because in the world today, a lot of people tend to treat that as a waste of time. I've even had some business associates before tell me, why are you spending so much time with the students, with the clients? If you say it's an hour, cut it short at 55 minutes. And I'm going like, okay, that's not the way I operate. And sure, I might so-called spend more time, but as a result, I end up having a larger pool of people who are willing to have conversations with me. And I think in the space that you're in, right, attempting to have that broader space of conversations, reaching out to people, streaming stuff, it's necessary as part of a much longer conversation. For me, I go to conversations of the heart. Sometimes I go into conversations of the mind, but most of the time it's heart and soul, right? So a lot of people are not feeling well emotionally. And firstly, they think they can handle it, but that's not the point. If you think you have brain damage, you straight away go and look for a neurosurgeon, unless, of course, your brain is so far down that road, you can't even recognize it. So the point is that you don't wait until stage 4, which unfortunately my dad got. He had time. He had stage 3, but he was stubborn. So he went into stage 4, and that was a little bit too late. That was the beginning of the end. So for individuals, yeah, I mean, my heart goes out to people who encounter sudden changes to their circumstances, like and your brother is one of them, and I'm glad that he's recovering in his own way. A lot of people encounter things that are pulled out from under the carpet, pulled from under their feet suddenly, but it doesn't have to be that way. Like you could get into an accident, you could get struck by lightning, for heaven's sake. or you can get hit very badly by a pandemic. But people who are adaptable and learn to prepare themselves probably prepare themselves only because in the past, there have been a lot of opportunities for learning about these things, right? They used to be, the reason why people are now more financially savvy is because 1998, 2002 dot-com crisis, and so on. So there's a lot of all this that has hit people, and suddenly they awaken. They go like, no, this is important for me. I need to go for it. And I think we're now facing an awakening where emotional well-being, mental well-being is concerned.
Is that why you also decided to use like NLP to support people specifically? But also the question could possibly be, why did you use NLP specifically to help these people?
So I'm multi-trained in different modalities. So as a counselor, I mean, I learned counseling in '98 from the Temasek Poly. Back then they had a program where it was connected with another US university. So they wanted to create a pathway for you to do like a master's program, right? Unfortunately, they didn't make it past that because it was way too expensive. That 1 year specialist diploma program, they accepted me because of two practices. Number one was NLP. The late Mr. Anthony Yeo, who was also the father of counseling in Singapore, he actually said this to me. He said, "You're already a master practitioner of NLP. What do you need this program for?" And I said, "Well, to legitimize what I already know and to see what else I can do with whatever it is that's in the field." Then he accepted me. So through that journey, I remember asking myself, what's the distinction that makes treatment modalities successful? And all I can say is that every individual has got the same, who has the same issue, may not respond to the same treatment, right? So I can use cognitive behavioral therapy. It may not work for you, it may work for somebody else. I can use EMDR, it may work for someone, and I've tested it on one particular friend of mine who was feeling a little bit anxious during a major breakdown. Didn't work for him at all. So as I was looking through the modalities and started to compare different ones, I mean, you name it, I've tested it out. Sound healing, hypnosis, chakra healing, energy medicine. I've tested all forms and manner of healing modalities, dialectical behavioral therapy, systemic therapy. They form a very nice basis of how to work with individuals if they match, if they work well. NLP is not a treatment modality. It is a means of understanding a person's mental model of the world. Then you craft an appropriate change based on whatever they give you. So technically, NLP is hacking the mind by collecting information, right? So once I know how you think, I can more easily fit in different approaches into the treatment modality. So sometimes it's very surprising to know that as long as I spend that 30 minutes deeply listening, I don't say a single word, just deeply listening. After 30 minutes, the problem disappears on its own. And I didn't even say anything. And at the end of it, people will go like, "I feel so much better. I don't know what you did to me, but I feel so much better." And it's like, dude, it's not me. It's just that, I think that's what you needed. That's all you needed. Whereas there's some which are even very much more complex, of course, where they've got major phobias. You can try the so-called NLP phobia cure and it doesn't work at all. It's supposed to take 5 minutes. It doesn't work at all. I have to understand the person, modify the technique because techniques are malleable. Individuals and their conditions are fixed because of certain reasons. So whenever I adjust myself according to what they need, I usually get them to a place where they are in a better place, so to speak. Right. So I still remember one NLP phobia cure that I did that was 3 hours long, but vis-a-vis other kinds of treatment modalities, 3 hours is considered like a drop in the bucket, right? Whereas in the past, we'll say like, oh, that was a failure because you're supposed to do it in 15 minutes. But this was a very different thing. And why this is so complex is because, firstly, we need to understand that human beings and the multiple, neurological connections we can make, there are infinite connections. There's so many. So just because you're depressed and I'm depressed doesn't mean we are being depressed by the same thing. I mean, at a functional level, right? You can say we'll take antidepressants and we'll just go home, right? But that's symptomatic, and everybody knows that. For some people, it's easier to just do the depression therapy chemically and deal with it chemically. And yes, there are some individuals who do have an issue from a neurological, physiological standpoint, and they have no choice but to continue with treatment. But that's the realm of psychiatry, which, if anyone is being treated by a psychiatrist, please go and see a psychiatrist first before you approach and attempt to use any other modality. They'll probably say, yeah, if it feels good for you, go give it a shot. But try not to get off your meds or whatever. So that's a medical treatment. That's a valid form of therapy. But beyond that, people don't just want to stay the same. Most of the time, once they realize how trapped they can feel, they want to break out of that jail. They don't want to be there anymore. So what's the difference that makes people different? So I chose to look into neuro-linguistic programming because it's more flexible. It models after, firstly, I need to be able to understand how my patient thinks. So as I'm listening, I'm actually modeling the dysfunctional strategy, the cognitive strategy. And by taking a look at that pattern, it becomes quite apparent to me how they arrive at that, because technically I'm modeling how they make stuff inside their mind, how they create those chemical changes or imbalances. Now, I know some people will be educated to the fact that they say, but it is a disease. We can argue the disease model where a lot of people say, oh, you have mental illness and therefore you need to take medicine. I think that's a simplistic way of doing it. And in my opinion, I think if you need it, you have to do it, right? Because it's a lifesaver at times. People are depressed, they go take some medication, they calm down, they can find some platform to continue moving forward. Unfortunately, most people take that symptomatic cure and then they stick with it for decades. Decades. And when you take a look at their progress, there's no progress, but they're alive. Okay, so many people are just grateful for that. To be able to move forward, one has to say, am I learning to manage my distress, or am I learning to relieve my distress in the most symptomatic way possible? So if that's the case, then anybody can turn to anything, right? Alcohol, drugs, God forbid, right? But the truth is that we can't run away from mental ill-being, because life happens to people. It's happened to me many, many times. I can recall many instances where I was not well, right? And because I was able to recognize it, I could find help. So there was a person who, we had this quick discussion prior to the call. So there was this guy who came up to me and said, Stuart, how can firstly, you're a psychologist, you're a counselor, and you know all these different modalities. Then how come you can feel stressed and you can feel upset and emotionally down and stuff like that, right? I'm going like, dude, doctors also
We're
can
human.
catch disease,
Exactly. We're human.
so it's like I need to put up my defenses. I know I am vulnerable. That's precisely why I went to study all these things, because primarily it was for me. It's like, I remember the days where there was exam stress and nobody used to talk about it, but I was anxious. I knew people. There was one guy I remember, because in my roster, I'm number 3, according to the name list, right? Then this guy right in front of me, whose name starts with A, I remember him hyperventilating in a Sec 2 mathematics test. And he got taken out of the exams, man. That was gone,
Wow.
So it was like, why that level of anxiety? At first, I didn't understand it. But when it came to certain papers that I was a little bit more, anxious of, I started to feel parts of it. And I was going like, wow, this guy must have felt 10x more than what I felt. So it got me curious. How can somebody in the same circumstance experience a different thing than a majority of other people? How is that possible? And that's also for joyous experiences as well as negative experiences, right? So I remember getting into NLP training with Dr. Richard Bandler back in '97. I had to fly over to the United States. And one of the things he says quite candidly is that a lot of people know how to amplify bad feelings, but a lot of people don't know how to amplify good feelings. And if we know how to feel good for no good reason, it means, a lot of people wake up, their default state is grouchy, right? Whereas for other people, they have not thought of the idea of waking up and deliberately waking up happy and joyful and
Yep.
grateful. So some people will accuse us of saying things like, oh, then you're cheating yourself. I'm not sure. I think we already are. That's the point. The point is, if you're acting, would you rather act a successful role or would you rather act a failure role? So
Yeah, 100%,
this
100%. I
one
mean,
is
if it's like with the same choices, we must just choose the better road, right? So
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons why I chose NLP. But don't get me wrong, I explore every modality. There's some people who say, oh, does crystal healing work? For some people, it just does. I'm not going to turn someone away because they believe something, but belief is a fundamental psychological pillar in healing, right? So it doesn't matter whether I do some ritual over you, or some people do prayer, some people do meditation. I've studied a lot of all these, and as a result, I know some people are more willing to adopt certain kinds of treatment modalities than others, because they may have been disappointed by counselors before, and nothing wrong with the counselor, but it may have been the inappropriate treatment at the wrong time. So
right.
it's just sometimes the matching of expectations and the outcome that people expect and they want.
Okay, so very briefly, maybe you can just also let us know what is the because we want to get definitely into the main topic as well, but also very briefly, right? You just let us know what is your personal goal for your business.
Oh, that's a huge area. So for those of you who are in business and you are struggling to figure out the sanity behind it. There's some days where you have no clue what you're doing. There's other days where you're so laser sharp and so focused that anything that you do that drags you out of that mode upsets you, right? There's that kind of a focus. So my main target in terms of business is to alleviate and to elevate people to a level where they can see the code in their business, right? So it's systemizing, getting productive, dealing with their efficiencies by really getting granular in their thinking, so that when they sit down in front of a computer, like for example in streaming, they know exactly which buttons to press in which sequence in order to achieve the result that they need, and they no longer have to think about it. That comes from the elements in NLP, of course, but that's where we do modeling of business and business processes. So on one hand, it's business processes. On the other hand, it's the psychological processes. When you marry these two, you have a perfect blend of the mindset, the appropriate mindset for the appropriate business goal. And unfortunately, most people have the right mindset for the wrong business goal. And once we sort that out, things actually become a little bit clearer. And then businesses end up becoming more productive. Like I mentioned just before we went live, one of my students just clocked, within a span of about a couple of months, clocked a 57% increase in revenue, which is very nice, And but yeah, of course, it takes hard work. It's not just a magic, snap of a finger. But we study the patterns of thinking, and then we adjust the patterns of thinking in order to make it concrete, foundational, so that the ground is set for scaling. Right? Everybody aims for scaling, but scaling is just one out of 5 core business directions that you should be aiming for. So most people are not aware of those 5. That's why they can't look for me.
Awesome. Because I think for most people also, because they are the main driver of their business. So definitely you need to make sure that main driver is properly functioning. Otherwise, you could be driving towards not a very good direction if the main driver is not in a good state. But anyway, that's a topic for possibly a very long discussion. Long discussion. So then let's get into it, because I think what we are talking about over here in this particular session is a very important thing about trauma.
Yes.
Right? So can you tell us what is trauma?
So there are various different views of trauma. Okay, so there are some people who think that trauma is a very big thing. I encountered some nuclear explosion, and as a result, I'm forever emotionally and physically scarred. What is true, however, is that in a room of, let's say, 50 people, and I release, let's say, a cockroach into the room, okay, I'm pretty sure that we can divide the room into two parts, right? One part which is running away from that cockroach, and the other part that is busy trying to smack it to death, right? So why is it that that event triggers two completely diverse reactions in the room? And that is the premise, right? So your external triggering event can be anything. It could be somebody calling you names as a child, but to other people, they call you names, it's not a big deal, right? But for this particular person, you call him or her names, something gets stuck. It's
After
mentally,
just that one trigger word, just a word
it,
that's like nothing to people, but it's like one word. It's like you just
yeah,
don't call me
yeah.
that.
You wouldn't know, right? You wouldn't know. It could be
Yeah.
an interpretation of that word. It could be a glare that you gave. It could be something, but it's something that happens in an experience that automatically gets linked to some kind of meaning, and it's not
Mhm.
isolated, right? It usually is connected with a series of other events that took place that create a snowballing effect towards this thing called an emotional, mental, cognitive disturbance. So this kind of disturbance does a few things to people. Number one, it creates more so-called stress, anxiety, possibly, but it can be in almost any emotional state. It can be anger, it can be fear, it can be just straight up panic attacks. But whatever that end outcome is a disturbance inside the person's mind first that prevents them from functioning at their optimum. Okay? Functioning at their optimum doesn't mean that they're functioning, doesn't mean they can't function normally. Okay,
Mm.
just that if you could be operating at 100%, now maybe you're operating at 70%, but nobody notices because you're kind of like okay, right? Now the danger with entrepreneurs is this: if you are centrally the main person, you're the solopreneur. The moment you're down, it drags everything down, right? Revenues
Yep.
go down. Your time is very, very valuable in that sense. So what that does to a business is terrifying. But when
Mm.
you take a look at the large majority of entrepreneurs, strangely or not, I've met a number of them who have, if they were in a different context, they'll be deemed as a little bit cuckoo. You think about Steve Jobs, for example, right? He
Mm.
was, I mean, internal all the stories that you hear about Steve Jobs, he was literally like a nutcase. He was like a
Yeah.
nutcase for productivity, for excellence, and delivering what the customer wants, right?
For design, all kind of stuff.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So he was not just sharp, but he was also very demanding. So some people call him a narcissist. I'm not even sure whether he really qualifies on the psychological scales, because nobody really thought of him as crazy. I mean, yes, I mean,
Mm.
Elon Musk, would you say he's crazy? Yeah, I mean, for him to work 100 hours a week or plus, some people would deem him to be crazy. But the truth is, there are always certain kinds of disturbances that can drive a person, but that same disturbance can stop a person in his or her tracks.
Mm.
Okay, so that's why there are some people who are so compelled and so obsessed with achieving a particular goal, but after they achieve it, things start to crumble. Right?
Mm.
When sudden changes happen, then things start to crumble. Pandemic takes place. All of the underlying issues begin to pop up because you're now in a vulnerable spot, and people need to learn how to deal with these disturbances. So a disturbance doesn't have to be a very big disturbance, like you go into a panic attack or anything like that. It could be you freeze. Hasn't there been times where you're kind of like a little bit overwhelmed with work, and then you're going like, brain fog? What's going on here? You're disoriented. And that can be a triggering effect that creates a disturbance. And then for the rest of the week, you're wondering, what the heck happened to me? Right? So those kinds of things do happen. And then most people would then just go through the passage of time for healing, don't talk to anybody about it, and then they leave it because it just took me about a week to recover, but that was it. Right? So they
Mm.
don't have anybody to talk to. Guess what? Your brain has now recognized a pathway to do the same thing again in the future.
Uh, mhm.
So when something like that gets triggered, it not only gets triggered faster and more easily, it is rehearsed. Now, what happens
Mm.
when I learn how to write with my master hand, right? My right hand. my words get more and more mature over time because the neurological connections are solidified over time. But if I'm rehearsing that all the time and then now my right hand breaks, right, or gets sprained and it's in a cast, I have to use my alternate hand to do that, and it's very uncomfortable. The more I try to do this, however, the more I train it up. Let's say I'm in a cast for 6 months, right?
Mhm.
So I'm deliberately forcing myself to sign things, write things with my left hand or my non-master hand. I'm going to eventually mature my skill set, my ability to write with my non-master hand. So here's the
So,
thing. A lot of people are rehearsing the same patterns, not knowing that they are patterns, and then they're wondering, why does this keep happening to me? And as a result, those things have a trigger, a runaway effect. And that's why a lot of people engage in addictive behaviors. Now, addiction, again, is another big space, but addictive behaviors such as playing computer games,
Mhm.
turning to watching TV mindlessly and Netflix on reruns and stuff like that, engaging in any sort of addictive behavior, including eating. You talk about pornography, sex, all that kind of stuff. Alcohol, that's another big one. Cigarette smoking, possibly. All of that comes together because it's a repetitive behavior that distracts you from the brain forming up those solid connections over time.
Mm.
So you disengage, and then some people wonder, why is this guy always doing X whenever Y happens? It's a program behavior. And unfortunately for addictions, as we all know, they're not so easy to break. It does take a little bit of long-term care to deal with, but there is a pattern in terms of trauma. And when you look for a soothing behavior, it ends up becoming the default go-to. And I can tell you, in my case, my default soothing behavior was reading and learning.
Mm.
I didn't know how to figure it out. I went to the library, picked up a couple of books. I found a soothing solution to it, and then I got hooked. And guess what? I ended up turning to learning voraciously as a coping mechanism, but not necessarily acting on it. And a lot of people are like that.
Ah.
So,
Okay, so if I may ask, so because I think the brain is a very interesting thing, where in terms like when we learn something, our brain slowly finds the shorter way to get to the same result. So based on what you say just now, my brain just kind of triggered this a little bit. Does it also
yeah.
mean that because when it comes to negative stuff, it does the same pattern because the brain is kind of like in what I used to kind of agree with is the subconscious mind is more like a minus yes man. So does it mean that when it comes to negative thinking, does it also have the same pattern of like finding the same shortcuts to the negative experience, something like that? Do you get my drift?
So we have heuristics and we have shortcuts because we create associated meanings. So, for example, if you see a guy, if he took off his shirt and his entire upper body is covered with tattoos, what's your reaction? Positive or negative? I mean, just the gut
I
visceral
think,
reaction.
yeah.
Sorry.
It's like, wow, nice.
Okay. So
That
for
has to
you,
go through a lot of pain. I mean, I'll be like, wow. I mean, it's a lot of work to put see yourself in the chair and just like ding 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 ding. It's
that's
tough
right.
work.
So for a lot of people in a certain generation, they would view it as, holy cow, this guy is awesome, right? There's even a sense of reverence for this guy, right? How in the world did you do that? And on top of that, of course, if he got a really good artist to do it, it'll be even more worth relishing and also praising, right? So that's one way of recognizing that. But the visceral reaction I get from some people is absolute horror. It's like, this is the devil in incarnated, right? Because he's got tattoos. Oh my god, must be an evil guy. Right. So the funny thing is that that's just a heuristic that we created based on past meanings that were created from our experiences. So when people don't consistently look back, reflect, and check whether those belief systems have to be updated, it's like a computer, right? Every once in a while, Windows shuts down and updates itself. But we don't have that automatic mechanism. The only way is through
Right.
communication and experience. So in a sense, we're constantly being updated, but in a sense, we don't know that we're being updated. And sometimes we tend to go to the things where we update worse stuff because it's a magnet, like attracts like. You tend to be more comfortable. Let's say you enjoy cursing and swearing, okay? You tend to be more comfortable with people who curse and swear in that sense. And if you're somebody who is uncomfortable with people who curse and swear, you wouldn't mix around with them anyway. So
Right.
the irony is that sometimes the more of what it is that you do that's the same, the more it amplifies what is the same. So
Mm.
as a result, we then have to ask, what is the meaning that you created? So I'll give you a case in point. There was a lady who came to me. Her issue was that every time she couldn't get over the fact that one of her friends had sort of like betrayed her. I won't go into the details. So the betrayal was difficult. And this friend had been her friend for a very, very long time. You're talking about more than 10 years. And they used to be very intimate in terms of their sharing, being confidants for each other. And so happened that when she found out that she was betrayed by this friend, she got so upset that almost everybody was going to betray her. It was like a generalization, right? To a
Right.
point where when she came to see me, she was also very skeptical. Like, you're also gonna, betray
Take
me. You're going
advantage and
to
stuff like that.
spill my secrets and all that kind of stuff. So the irony is that the more you think that, the more the reality is likely to take place because you're looking out for evidence of that. And if it's disturbing and it sticks inside your mind, then guess what? You're going to look out for the evidence that allows that self-fulfilling prophecy to take place. So we need to find ways to break that meaning. So we had to go through certain exercises to diffuse that immediate A/B program. And it happens almost every day. For some people, it's the smell of fried chicken, and then they have this uncontrollable urge, to want to go and eat fried chicken. But for others, it's like, every time I see someone who tries to get close to me, oh, this person is gonna try something on me, is gonna betray me, and I'm gonna be very disappointed. So rather than treat how they are, they respond in the world in a more paranoid fashion because they're trying to protect themselves.
Right. So that does means that because like probably in terms of the trauma, the experiences they had, that actually affected their living experience with other people as well, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah, okay.
So here's the thing: when individuals, like right now, I understand that PSLE is around the corner. A lot of stressed up parents, a lot of stressed up students, and who just don't recognize the pattern of trauma re-traumatization. So it becomes a situation where the straw breaks the camel's back. When the straw breaks the camel's back, you thought it was that thing that was the issue. Oh, maybe that person used that word on you and called you a name, or then you blame that person. But it's actually not that person. It's a cumulative function of all of these things happening, and then that thing triggers off the entire domino effect. So from the standpoint of trauma, I don't think we should treat it very lightly. There's really nothing we can do about it because it's already happened. But what we can do is utilize a way to re-look at the situation through different lenses. Right? So previously, I can go back and say, okay, I was a child and I was maybe screamed at by my teacher and I was feeling very bad about it, very angry when I scratched the car, caused a lot of problems, got sent to the principal's office, etc. But when I go back, I can also look at it from a very different standpoint. Number one, how does a child actually, what are the good qualities there? If you apply it in a different context, doesn't that mean that you matured earlier, that you were able to stand up for something, right? Maybe you just stood up in the wrong context, utilizing the wrong language, and that's why you got yourself into trouble. But if you did that as, let's say, I don't know, a criminal defense lawyer, as a military commander who could direct people and really say what you mean, maybe that would have been a better context. So people need to recognize that the meanings we create inside our mind can be recrafted and recreated. This is the process known as reframing, and reframing can be done in so many different ways. But most people are unable to do effective reframing on themselves because they think of excuses. They think of excuses rather than new meanings.
So
So
if let's say you are thinking in that sense, sorry to cut a bit, but if let's say you're thinking if it's very hard for someone to make new meaning from that, how does one actually handle their own trauma then?
So there are, I'll break it down into a few pathways. Maybe I'll start off with the simplest one, which is going to account for maybe the 70% of us who are generally quite okay, but we end up in small little speed bumps along the way. So that's known as learning how to manage our own internal dimensions of energy. So primarily, we've got 5 key dimensions of energy, right? The physical, emotional, mental, social, and spiritual. So spiritual is not religious, it's about the connectedness that we have with the world. Now, here's the thing about these 5 so-called internal batteries. Everybody who's on and who's learning from this recording subsequently, what you can do is think about these 5 categories and brainstorm what do you currently do on a regular basis, let's say on a weekly basis, to cover these areas. Like for some people, they work out, they exercise. For some people, they take care of their nutrition. For other people, maybe they hang out with their friends just to get some social energy back. Now, over a period of time, I've come to realize most people are lopsided in one of these 5. Right? Either they didn't think it was important, or they do very little of it, and they are going about their business, not realizing that the batteries that are low are draining off and siphoning off the energy from the other battery cells, right?
Okay.
So when you are deficit in one, it could cause a complete systemic collapse. So the one that usually causes the biggest harm is the physical. So a lot of people are not aware of what they're eating. They're not aware of what they're doing to their sleep patterns. They're not aware of exercise routines and things like that. So by learning to identify with what we tend to go for as a recharge mechanism, right? You're completely totaled. You want to go and do that one thing, whatever that is, right? You sit down in the spa, get yourself pampered. That could be one. Another one could be just like meditating and just practicing some breathing. That could be another one, but they may function differently across these 5. Now, what happens is that if you are stronger in one of them, let's say you're very weak at physical, so you don't pay attention to your nutrition, you don't do any kind of a proper nutrition plan or exercise routine or an endurance practice, but you're very good at socializing. You go out, you get lots of energy by talking to people, interacting with people, and so on. And guess what? You work through the social side in order to build up your physical side. So you're interacting with friends and saying, hey, why don't we go out to Botanic Gardens rather than just hang out in this pub and go recharge ourselves there? Now, in that set of practices, you then rate yourself on a 0 to 10 scale, right? So as you rate yourself on that 0 to 10 scale, you'll be able to determine which one is the main culprit that tends to sap your energy and where you need to constantly do more recharge in. So I remember in my good old days, it was always physical, right? Because, intellectually, mentally, I tend to go for learning. I always enrich myself. And it became a nice, healthy balance up to a point of time when I realized that, sometimes I run away into the books, just to avoid problems. So after I started recognizing that, it became apparent to me that I couldn't just rely on that alone. I needed to use the mental side to reinforce the one that was draining the most of my energy, which was the physical. And I remember in the good old days, I'll be falling sick left, right, and center. Minimum is almost like I need to get an MC at least 3 times in a year. So suffice to say, right now, actually since 2016 November, I've not fallen sick.
Nice.
Not that I intend to, but it's a consequence of knowing what to do and how to apply it into the real world. For some people, they go like, okay, then this sense of purpose and connection to the world is irrelevant, because I don't see anything important in spirituality. Well, there's always a time and place for it. So there are some people who believe that they have a certain passion that they aim for. That's also a sense of connectedness with the world, but they need to amplify it, because sometimes the world can crush your passions. It just takes one small thing to flip, and then suddenly that connectedness is gone. Then you need to seek other ways to arrive at that passion. So I used to work in a relatively large, medium-sized organization, right? We were talking about 200 people plus. Then when I left and started my own corporate consulting, it was a very drastic shift from what I was used to and what I was doing. So I remember that transition itself was actually very difficult for me. I remember going quite crazy, having to do bids and tenders for the government. It was nuts. I still remember there was 1 week I was dealing with 21 proposals in 1 week.
Wow.
21 proposals, and I had to get it done. And by the time I get it on, let's say I read it on, let's say, Friday, and the end submission date is Friday, I only have that much time to finish it, and my mind is going in 21 different places plus. Crazy, right? So I remember having like anxious, almost nervous breakdowns at a point of time, but it was a rite of passage. I needed to learn how to tolerate it. And what I've come to realize is that treating it starts off with managing the energy. So I can't say that I'm a psychiatric case. Maybe some people think I am, but if in all for all intents and purposes, I think the average person needs to manage the 5 categories of energy, learn to balance it out, know to recognize that they are getting drained and how to recharge and self-care. This is the central, most important piece for the average person. Okay, so that's one. Second one would be understanding that there's a distinction between distress relief, which is temporary, versus distress tolerance, which is you're working towards taking on more. Right. So I know some people will think I'm crazy just for saying that. But hey, the world revolves around mental health now. So when we look at going up to a boss, let's say, for those of you who are working for somebody, and you tell your boss, I want to train my mental resilience. Can you give me an extra project? I think he'll look at you and go like, I think you're nuts, right? But then there's some bosses who go like, that's a good thing. That's actually pretty smart. You stretch yourself by putting your efforts in an area where you want to test yourself voluntarily, rather than push comes to shove. Wow, there's a pandemic. Company is going ballistic because there's no deals. You get forced to do multiple kinds of things, and then you collapse. That's terrible. Right? So we aim to prepare ourselves for the worst case scenario. So distress relief would be, I feel terrible. At the end of the day, I go drink a bottle of wine, which is what I used to do, by the way. Right? My liver was terrible. So I can't remember whether I told you this before in separate sessions, but I would be able in one evening to finish 2 small bottles of sake, a glass of beer, and finish throughout the rest of the night 4 bottles of red wine on my own. Right.
I
That
think you
was
did
how-
mention something like that.
Yeah,
But it's been a while since me.
So it was like, wow, back then it was like a badge of pride. Wow, you can drink a lot. But nowadays it's like, why kill yourself? And rather than being tired, you know how it is when you get wasted, the next day is also in a sense wasted. So
Yep.
when we know how to detect that we're seeking temporary relief all the time, then the real work begins. Number one, do you acknowledge that this is temporary relief? Right? Smoking, gambling, whatever kind of addictive behavior, even working, doing countless numbers of video streams, for example. Okay, in your case, but if let's say it's one of those things that you acknowledge, yeah, actually I'm overdoing this. I'm pushing too far and too hard for this, and deep inside of yourself, it's got nothing to do with you being lazy. It's got nothing to do with it's a form of an obsession that it feels a little bit out of control. And most of the people don't even get to that stage. Right? If you think about all the well-documented protocols, it starts off with what we call acceptance first. Right? And in fact, it's known as, right now, they call it acceptance and commitment therapy, which is, by the way, the basis of something called AA, Alcoholics Anonymous.
Alcoholics Anonymous.
So you accept what it is first, right? Then you decide and commit to what you need to do. You take action, and then you go through this cycle, right? Constant taking action on small little things so that you can prove your commitment to it. And accepting that, and by the way, acceptance does not mean that you condone, right? Acceptance means being honest with it, and you say, okay, I accept that this is a problem, right? Then the moment you have that, there are a wide number of opportunities that get opened up. The first one, as I mentioned, ACT can be utilized, where you're literally setting goals. You're accepting the fact, you're setting goals to bridge the gaps, and then you're working towards it. It's literally like life coaching, right? Although in a therapeutic context, but life coaches do this kind of stuff too. So that's one possibility. Set new goals. Decide that you're going to work on this area. You may be, you may find yourself constantly blaming people, and that may be your Achilles heel. So you recognize, I'm always blaming people. I'm always pointing fingers in the wrong direction. I accept that. I'm going to commit by ceasing my blaming, by learning maybe how to praise people, learning to not at blame, but rather finding the root cause of the solution, but talking it through so that we can jointly find a direction or a new way forward. So things like that can happen, right? So you work towards that. So that's a very practical way forward. But a lot of people are unable to bridge that emotional barrier where the trauma is really overwhelming. So this is where we go into the realm of emotions and the body. Now, not sure whether you know this, but if I ask you to think of an emotion, you can probably locate it in your body. This is known as embodiment practice. So an embodiment primarily is like this. Most of us, we tend to think that our emotions are out there. Actually, they're in here somewhere, in our body somewhere. So if you think about excitement, think about the last time you were really excited, right? And then you do a body scan. Where in your body do you feel that moment of excitement most in your body? Where would you associate it?
Well, when was the last time I was excited? It's been a while.
Like earlier on when you're playing this music, right, to get yourself a little bit more.
Yes. That was the most recent one. Yes, indeed.
So if you recall that, where were you? Where was that feeling of that energy or excitement or enthusiasm inside of your body?
I would say I think it's around here. The head to the heart area is just
Right.
like somewhere around there. Yeah.
Did you feel it in your hands as well? Because I noticed that you're kind of like moving your hands as well.
Yeah. I think it just came very natural. It's just a natural connection to that. Yeah.
Sure. So what happens is that we identify some of these locations, and then we begin to sit with that emotion in order to understand. For example, if it were anxiety and you experience anxiety, let's say in the gut, in the diaphragm, okay, good. Then you recognize that that's the home for anxiety. So you spend some time at home with anxiety. You invite that emotion out to have a conversation by going inside of your mind and pretending that it is another person. The nature of your relationship with that feeling is going to determine the nature of the relationship with the outer world. So if you encounter anxiety and you keep going like, shut up, get out, okay, like Gollum, for example, right? That thing is not going to have a very good relationship with you. And when that happens, you have a internal conflict. And that kind of internal conflict is going to probably amplify the messenger's volume. So anxiety functions mostly as a messenger, right? There's a distinction between recognizing it as a messenger versus expecting it to be able to get you to move ahead. So what I call a messenger emotion versus an enactor emotion. So is anxiety good to enact on your goals? Probably not, right? Anxiety is good to notify you, you need to prepare, otherwise you can't get to your goal. Please prepare properly. Please prepare adequately. And then if you've got a good relationship, you go like, oh, thank you so much for notifying me. Yes, I'll go prepare. And guess what happens to anxiety when you do prepare? It kind of like disappears. It's done its job, right? It's already delivered a message. The postman doesn't hang around after it's delivered the mail, right? Then you need to go inside and go, okay, so who inside here is a better enactor towards my goals? Let's say my goal is to start a business, okay? So rather than anxiety, maybe it is drive, enthusiasm. Okay, then I'll invite drive and enthusiasm into my body and use drive and enthusiasm to carry me forward into where I need to go. Right? So it's a simple way of doing it, but holding some space for the so-called negative emotion. By the way, I don't believe in a negative emotion. There must always be some kind of utility in the emotion, whether it's anger, depression, sadness, fear, whatever. There's always some kind of utility there. And if you sit down and acknowledge, okay, you're a messenger, you've given me this positive message, and it has to be a positive message. It's usually a warning of sorts. So it is a positive message. It's there to protect you. So that's where you begin to get to know yourself and tune into yourself and to calibrate to your internal awareness more effectively so that when other things happen, you're no longer freaking out. You're paying attention. You're listening in. You're going like, okay, there's something I need to do. Just give me a moment, collect yourself, collect the right kind of enactor emotions, bring that into your body as well. So when was the last time you experienced drive, enthusiasm, high energy? Bring it into your body. Like for yours, high energy, right? So you said it was in your upper torso up to your head. If you notice that there's a movement, for example, did it start from your head and go down to your heart? Or did it start from your heart and it went up to your head? So practice that direction. Amplify it by imagining the sensations growing inside of those parts of you. And what will happen is that you are now embodying the emotion that should be there rather than constantly going, I don't want you to hang around. Because you know how it is. If a really good friend is around and you try to push them away, they're just going to get louder. Right? So think about that internal negative voice as a really good buddy that was just going to amplify the volume until you really pay attention. So that's
Okay.
that's another practice.
Right.
Third and final practice, which I would say would be easy for the average person to do, would be journaling. A lot of the time, we don't put our thoughts on paper. When you don't put your thoughts on paper, you can't revisit and go, was I kind of out of sorts? And how many days was I out of sorts? And if it's been 5 days, maybe it's time for me to go speak to a professional, you know? And that's where I was on Safra Radio, I think, or one of the channels there, and they were asking me about this. So I came up with the idea called BITE Seed. It's just a cryptic acronym, okay? So BITE stands for the beliefs, internal images, your thoughts, and your emotions. So all of these are the stuff that's going on inside your head. People can't see it. You reflect on
So
these.
it's belief, internal emotions,
Belief,
thoughts.
internal images, thoughts,
Ah,
and your emotions. So all these are internal. Nobody really knows unless you verbalize it or unless you write it down. Okay. Then you go into seed, which is sensing it from inside. You go a little bit more to the outside. Things that impact you, such as sensations. So sensations are the inside creeping outwards, right? So do you feel back pains? Do you feel a neck ache? Do you feel a pain in the gut? Things like that. Experiences. What are the past memories that are playing on you right now? Right. So, for example, there was a gentleman who approached me for some counseling, senior leader, and his past experiences were that as an expatriate, he was moving around the world a lot with his young son. So his experience was just go do, basically sell your soul to the corporate devil, right? And just keep doing whatever they tell you to do. Just if they tell you to go to Thailand, you go to Thailand. If they tell you to go to Alaska, you just go to Alaska. And unfortunately, he didn't recognize that had a toll on his relationship with his family. Okay, and he would wake up with sensations of a lower back pain. Now, somatically, what happens in the back pain is a sense of not being able to hold up your body, almost like, you have no spine, right? I mean, I wasn't saying that he had no spine, but he constantly woke up with these kind of feelings. And I said, and I asked him a casual question. It was just, associative, because I'm also aware of the unconscious, the depth psychology of these people. How do you feel as an employee in this company? And he said, I feel like a guard dog, right? So you don't stand up to your bosses, whatever they say, I do. Yeah, okay. So that kind of like connected the idea of being spineless and not being able to stand up to his bosses, and let him know that the job was creating havoc back at home, and indeed the relationship was terrible. So we talk about sensations because, again, sensations embodied in our body are saying something, right? They're not emotions, but they're sensations, but they're starting to come out into the body. They're starting to manifest. So this is something important. And we apply the same principle of conversation. Second one, experiences. Where do these sensations connect in terms of our memories and the time, the events that were taking place, right? Then the next one is energy levels. As we talked about, the 5 dimensions of energy, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel today? Right? So some people, they'll wake up, they'll feel like a 7, and then at the end of the day, they go down to a 2. Okay. So is that a pattern? Or are some people waking up at 10 and then they go back to bed at like a 8 or 9 and they feel the day has been awesome. So depending on the patterns that of energy that we're keeping track of, by the way, this is actually a good check-in, especially for the guys. And we all know that guys tend to, if they are suicidal, they tend to be more successful at suicide than women. That is why, men have a much higher suicide rate. A
Yep.
simple way of checking in is just asking them, how are you on a scale of 1 to 10 today? And if they start going like, yeah, I'm a 9, and you can sense that energy within them, that's great. It's cool. By the way, for kids too, it's nice to just get them to, gauge. Okay, this one is a sad face. This one is a happy face on a scale of 1 to 10. So where are you? Go and stick a sticker there. And what happens is that the moment they give you a rating, that today I'm a 5, pay attention. They're saying something, but they may not be able to articulate it. If they are introverted, and like myself, if I was introverted, I have no clue how to verbalize it. So then people are surprised. Why do people attempt suicide or actually kill themselves? Because we didn't have a feedback mechanism that could save people's lives. Right.
That would be a better question to ask rather than "Are you okay?" Right. So
Yeah.
give me a
Right.
1 to
Are you
10.
okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very generic question. Like, okay,
Yeah.
okay, lor.
Yeah, precisely. So how are you today? And I think that's the most important. I'll classify this the question, the COVID question of the year. Right?
No, the COVID question of the year is, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Because most people are on Zoom.
Well, yeah, I mean that is the actual question they ask, but the question they should be asking is, how are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah.
And I've been teaching a lot of virtual management practices, and it is more and more obvious that leaders who do not ask this question will cause psychological distress in organizations. And I mean, you probably know Amy Edmondson, who talks about the concept of psychological safety, right? And it's pretty clear that when you don't initiate by being aware of and caring of another person's emotional state, basically what you're saying is, I don't care about you, I don't see you, I don't hear you, I don't want to hear you, and just do what I want. It's like, come on, So understanding that, we said seed, right? The last one is decisions. So when you're journaling down what's your energy levels for the day, keep track of the patterns, but you also need to think about the decisions that you're making. So how do you decide on a day-to-day basis? Is it because your energy was low, that's why you made a terrible decision, right? Okay, good. Then now you tend to make these kinds of decisions. Like this morning, I woke up in a relatively bad state because I had a bad night's rest. So in the morning, I already detected that because I knew my energy was like kind of like flagging. It's like, I need a coffee now, And I decided that since this was the case, I know my pattern. If I'm low in energy, I need to do some stuff to raise my energy so that I don't screw up the rest of my day. What I used to do was I used to decide, oh, I'm so out of sorts, I'm just gonna have a nap, I'm just gonna take it easy. Tell you what, that makes things worse most of the time, at least for me. So when I notice that pattern, I make a different decision. It's like, okay, I'm not gonna decide to just take it easy today. In fact, I'm gonna work out right now. And things start to change, because you're doing things that end up corroborating the value of that decision later on. It could be maybe you shouted at somebody, then you ask yourself, how in the world did I make that decision? What's my energy level? What was the sensation inside my body? What kind of experiences flash inside my head when I was reacting that way? And then you go like, dang, is that pattern again? Okay, then that's a decision point that can literally change the course of your life. So journaling is what I call self-awareness analytics, right? So we don't have business intelligence for the human soul, so we can only use journaling, and I can tell you it's a very powerful process. Other than that, there will be more complex measures where counselors, psychotherapists, life coaches, psychiatrists will then have to go through in order to help you out. So this bridges to the question, when do you need to actually see a psychologist or a counselor or whomever, right? A therapist. So let me cite it from my own personal experience. It's personal, but I hope that it kind of like helps people to recognize that you need to be cognizant of when you're low and when is the time to really pull the plug on things and just go and seek professional help. Um, so I'll tell you two stories. One of it is mine. The other one is of someone who was trying to seek help from me. So I'll start with the letter. I get a message on Facebook. Right, everyone who wants to reach out to me, you can go to my Facebook profile and look me up, send me a message. Sometimes I respond immediately, sometimes I don't, but give me some time. And this person cited a very, very long script of, I know, some of these people actually watch my videos, surprisingly, on Facebook. And this person was saying, yeah, I really think I need some help. And I realized that she was under a lot of distress. And not because of anything else. It wasn't a traumatic thing. It's one of those things where you have one small thing here, another small thing there, 20 small things there, another 5 here, and it all accumulates to create this immense, devastating pressure that completely wipes the average person out. Okay, and from what I was hearing from what she was saying, it dawned on me that she needed quite a fair bit of help. Unfortunately, she didn't have the funds to be able to seek help. She didn't come from a very well-to-do family. So as a result, I realized a couple of things. When seeking for help, you need to know what some of these sources are. Like, Samaritans of Singapore is one of them. You just need to talk to somebody. In fact, talk to anybody. Go to a religious leader. If you're Christian, go to your pastor. If you're Buddhist, go to the temple monk or whomever, right? Somebody whom can give you a little bit of a listening ear outside of your normal circle, for example. And that can be free, by the way. Right? What you don't want to do is go and dump on friends who themselves may be having some challenges. And for couples in particular, the danger is that if both couples are okay, their energies are high, that's great. But if both are low and one demands of the other, hey, I'm in a low state right now, I need to talk, but the other person is not in a position to do that, okay, now you're setting up an environment. And of course, a lot of couples have challenges like this. Who do I turn to? How do I make this happen? Because you've always been my pillar of support. Why can't you do this? And then the expectations just go all over the place. And then there's a nuclear explosion in that sense back at home. So rather than that, the starting point, especially for couples, is begin utilizing active listening. Like, okay, tell me what's happening to you. Okay, I hear this is what you're feeling right now. I'm really not in a position right now to be able to fully do this. Am I missing anything? Should we both go and see a counselor or something like that, because we're just so low right now? And to a great extent, just that kind of a conversation is likely to ease the direction, right? It's likely to ease that pain and difficulty. So from knowing where you get triggered and knowing that you ought to improve your standing, you start asking the question, okay, is my energy really low? Has it been like this for the last 5 days, last 2 weeks? Okay, I think I'm gonna pull the plug immediately after, let's say, 10 days, and I've got to go and see somebody. So because I've not approached anybody yet, so obviously for many people, their network does not include coaches and confidants, right? It's usually clients and clients and colleagues mostly, right? So you don't include coaches, you don't include counselors in your so-called networking. So when you feel that you're out of sorts for a little bit too long, it's best to talk to somebody, anybody. How do you know that you need to speak to a professional when that anybody is stumped? They can only give you advice, and most of the time that advice doesn't quite work for you. You're kind of going like, yeah, I've tried it before. Or they give you advice and maybe they get a little bit judgmental, as what a lot of friends will do. Oh, yeah, there's nothing, don't worry, which incidentally is gonna trigger even more anxious feelings, more negative feelings. So once you start feeling that way, once or twice in a row, my suggestion is just ask for referrals. I might not be able to help you with your situation because I specialize in trauma. I specialize in things that are associated with disturbing moments in your life. Okay, why do I do that? Because I typically can deal with that within 1, if not 2 sessions. If you're in depression, I might not be able to help you because that's a very long-term process. So we need to know what the source of depression is, because you can be depressed, same label. The pathway towards your depression may have been different than a whole bunch of other people, right? Anger management is another one. Addiction is another one. So I tend to deal with things which are short, sharp, because I know that I won't be able to grant very, very long-term care for people. So I'll typically refer that out. Unless, of course, they have got a very close relationship with me, then, of course, I'll work with them for a slightly longer term. So when you are seeking out professionals, what should you kind of like pay attention to? I think the first thing is make sure that when your emotions are kind of stuck, you have to say what your body is saying. Let the professional listen to what your symptoms are. Right? Just as a doctor would do a diagnosis, they'll say, where do you feel the pain? Right? Can you direct it? And it's similar. So you're going to explicate what you're feeling. And in a counseling session, a lot of the time, we're talking about the impact that this feeling has had on you. Right? So you're going to be verbalizing a lot of these things, and you may not know exactly where to go. But as long as you're open, right, and as long as that environment is safe enough for you to take charge of your own emotions and just bare your soul for a while, the professional is likely to guide you towards understanding the impact of the emotion on your life. It's likely to help you to see beyond what you think is going to be the only problem that's happening. Open things up so that you might be able to see new possibilities, new choices. Now, what happens when people get traumatized? A lot of the time is they get stuck. Right? When you experience recurring difficult processes in your life or events in your life, you feel like you're stuck, you can't progress. The counseling process is meant to get you to open up so that you can regain some sense of normalcy. You can go back to your day-to-day living, right? So part of it will be, okay, let's talk about it. Let's process that emotion. Now, where trauma and difficult thoughts are, I specialize in EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So EMDR has been touted as one of the most efficacious treatments for PTSD. It trumps even cognitive behavioral therapy, and I utilize it to great effect. It has some limited but useful benefits for people who are experiencing depression and grief. It also is particularly helpful for people who experience some levels of anxiety too, based on the studies. And most of the time, it's just a way of getting to understand and process your emotions without necessarily having much talk, right? Which is good, because then on one hand, I don't have to talk so much. On the other hand, the client gets to express his or her transformations in that particular session. So EMDR is relatively efficacious. Some other people will utilize hypnosis. I utilize some forms of hypnosis for treatment. So hypnotherapy is a completely different thing. We are attempting to reprogram patterns of behavior. So for example, if you've always looked at someone as a betrayer, as a traitor, as a liar, right? And every time you get this very bad visceral reaction, and people accuse you of having anger management problems. Okay? So what we can do in hypnotherapy is firstly reconcile that internal rage, for example, and to kind of like open the valve for it to kind of dissipate. That's one way we can do it. And the way we do it typically is by raising resources and focusing on strengths, right? Hypnosis is not particularly helpful, or hasn't been particularly reliable and helpful in removing old problems, getting rid of old problems, right? That typically is in the realm of CBT, maybe even EMDR. But hypnosis is quite helpful in helping people to see the future clearly, visualizing great vibes, great feelings, and recalling resourceful and strong moments. Right? So that can be also a very helpful anchor for people to move forward if they want to. Right? So regression therapy is another one which is very frequently used. Some people call it timeline therapy. Some people call it age regression, whatever, is similar. So what you want to do is, especially if you're utilizing that modality, is to find out where you learned the meaning and whether the meaning is still relevant today, right? I like to cite this example where when I was much younger and I went to my grandma's house, it was huge. When I was 19 years old and I went to visit my grandma's house, the house felt very small. So I can either say that the house shrank, which is untrue, or I grew up, which is probably more true. But guess what? The image, the reason why it feels so small now is because my brain is stuck with the old memory. Something as simple as that, right?
Yep.
The old memory is interfering with the meaning that you could create today. So we use a form of regression therapy to kind of like explore some of these moments and create ways to enrich your map of the world so that you no longer have to view the world in such a limited form. Doesn't mean we what do you call erase those moments. It's just that we expand your choices, and with those
Make
choices,
a different meaning to it, right?
yeah, precisely. So there are quite a number of treatment modalities. Now, the danger comes when you are trying to do some form of therapy by reading about it and not really having a professional background. I think that's one of the things that Parliament is debating right now, because they want to formalize mental health. I mean, mental health professionals have been out there for a very long time, and unfortunately, there are a lot of ethical issues involved if you're not a certified professional. Like for myself, I'm bound by some guidelines in the American Psychological Association that, code of ethics, make sure you keep things confidential and all that. In fact, all the case studies I'm sharing, they're real, but they're based off real people. Because I can't tell you the exact same conditions. Otherwise, it's very easy to identify who these people are. And the deliberate nature of me giving cases so that I can illustrate and highlight the importance of this is probably important for the average person to know, so that you can kind of like connect and go like, am I similar in this case? Have I come to a point where, I've not counted, but it's been a long time since I've had high energy? Go talk to somebody. Because mental illness doesn't catch you when you're strong. It always catches you when you're weak. And when you're weak, this is where being with people, connecting with people, and having a strong social support group is better as an investment than all the money in the world. So go and make friends. Go and, I mean, if you've got some money, go and invest it in attending courses together. Buy some people a meal, have a cup of coffee, whatever it is. Establish a relationship with them so that in due course you can be there for them, they can be there for you. And there's nothing wrong with seeking help. And all I can say is that from my own experience, there was one day I was, and this was quite a number of years ago, I was in my office, and someone approached me. We started talking, and then it started to get really gruesome very fast. It was terrifying because this person was telling me personal, very, very personal, very private issues very quickly, and they were gruesome. Now, I know I'm
Will
a
you at least
counselor.
pay for it? So
No, this was not even a paid counseling session. This
Okay.
person, we started, and then, oh, by the way, can I just say something? And then started breaking down in
So
tears.
went in real deep.
Yeah,
Okay.
just went in really deep, and I tell you, the details were really gruesome. I won't mention what they are. It disturbed me so much. I could smell what was in her mind, in her pictures. It was
Wow.
just terrifying. It was so disturbing because it also involved a mutual friend of ours, and I had never seen this mutual friend in that particular light before. So I was like, okay, the looping started to take place. I was going like, holy crap, what's going on here? And I was literally frozen for a good half an hour after that conversation. I said, no, I've got to speak to somebody. Made a call to my supervising clinical supervisor for my EMDR program, and I said, I don't know what's gotten over me, but this thing was really hellish, very disturbing. I need to speak to you. And she said, yeah, I happen to have a slot at 7 p.m. Come over. I went over, we did some work. And out of the entire work that we did, at the end of it, I would say that from a level 10 disturbance, it went down to like 6, right? It didn't feel like very much of a help. But then the next day, it kind of like vanished from my head. In fact, right now, as I'm thinking about it, I don't recall the same emotional state anymore. That's what we talk about in terms of emotional processing. Emotional processing means that you're not just feeling it and you're rehearsing it. That's terrible. That's silly. But what you're doing is you're doing something with the feeling so that you're getting a different
Diffusing it as well, right?
perspective. Yes,
Mm.
you're getting a different perspective and a different meaning from it. And because of that, you don't need to look at that emotional state in the same way. For example, maybe some of the parents who are facing the work from home woes, right, where their kids are also on home based learning and they're just driving them nuts. So why? Because that trigger is causing a programmed behavior of getting frustrated. So they hear the kids scream or fight, and then this triggers the anxious state or the angry state or frustrated state. And guess what? The more they're in that environment, the more they rehearse that. But guess what? Even during a lockdown, right, you can get help over Zoom. You can.
Yeah.
You can pick up a phone and you can talk to somebody. That's the point. And most of the time, all of these things come through the cracks and fissures of our own limits. And all I can say is, as part of personal mastery and personal development, right, you grow because you dare to confront the breakage, you dare to confront the fractures, you dare to confront the fissures. It's not fun. I can tell you, when I went for therapy, it was not fun. it was terrifying because on one hand, you're going to have to go through those pictures again, but then you're in good hands because that person has been trained specifically to do that, right? And that was where I could just, share everything, and it took its own course, right? Because there was a protocol to follow. There was something that was very consistent and very measured and very safe. So I would like to encourage anybody, in fact, people who feel stuck in their life, go and see a life coach, right? Go and see a counselor, right? And they are trained to do these kinds of things. From a mental health standpoint, if you feel that you're a little bit down and you have no more goals to work on and you're kind of like floating and lost or whatever, go talk to a counselor. See what that does for you. Because these days, I mean, good counselors can go all the way up to like $500 an hour, right? If anybody wants to seek counseling, you can go to junior counselors. You can go to like NCSS has got a long list of counselors. Singapore Association for Counselors has got a long list of counselors. All of them have a master's degree, by the way, right? So if you're approaching someone with a master's degree in counseling, then you're going to expect to fork out a couple of $100, okay? But if you're going to, let's say, someone who's just there to listen, maybe attached to a church, attached to a community service center, or whatever it is, it's unlikely to be so expensive. You're talking about $25, $40, just as a stopgap measure, you know what I'm saying? Just so that you can allow those emotions to come up, get processed, and then you can decide. Maybe the counselor might even recommend to go and see a therapist. Maybe counseling and talking doesn't help as much. Then you take it to the next level. And that's where the only thing I would say about the mental health system in Singapore is that we knew this would happen for a long time, but it was only isolated to certain cases. Like when I won the tender for HPB's mental wellbeing program, they wanted me to teach HR people to look out for signs so that they will go to these agencies, SOS, Fei Yue, all these places, right? And in the Academy of Singapore Teachers, one of the programs I run is called Growing From Within. It is a self-care program because teachers, and you probably know this, teachers are terrible at self-care because they're single-minded in ensuring that their students get the best. And as a result, as a caregiver, you're constantly caring for other people.
They're neglecting of themselves as well.
That's right. And they neglect a lot of this. And guess what? They think they're doing their kids a favor, but actually they're not. Right? So too much of that without a balance. I mean, when you take anything, and you overplay it, like caring, you overcare, you're smothering. Right? So that doesn't work, make sense at all. And the recent newspaper, or newspaper. Now everybody knows my age. The recent report on Channel News Asia talks about teachers knowing that this is a problem, and not many of them have avenues of getting help because there's a stigma associated with it. As we all know, in the good old days, when teachers had huge amounts of problems, they'll end up in IMH because that's the only place where, and the sources from IMH would probably agree with this. A significant category are teachers because it's very hard to find local sources of help. Nowadays, the Academy of Singapore Teachers does have an in-house separate objective unit that does counseling. And if any of you are teachers in the system, please go and contact iCare because they are the ones responsible for your well-being, and they're there. They're available for you to speak to you. And some of you, I know you like to speak to your own school counselors and so on, but do remember that when you're close to home, sometimes it's less easy to gain the space of separating the professional, separating the professional from the personal. And sometimes you might just call someone from some other part of the world who's a registered psychologist in America, for example, and get some help too, because now the world is really open. The point being that a lot of caregivers, it doesn't matter whether it's teachers, it could be someone caring for demented elderly, for example, suffering from dementia. It could be someone who's a cancer stricken, and his family members are undergoing that pressure of trying to resolve the pain, the problems, the nutrition and all that for this particular family member at home, amongst a whole host of things. You might be a caregiver to an autistic child, right? Someone with special needs. It's not so easy. So I would say the central piece is you've got to be able to learn to manage your energies, be able to craft a stronger boat to weather heavier storms. Right? Nobody goes out into stormy weather and then encounters a Category 5 storm in a sampan. Right? That's suicide. Right? So we need to learn how to manufacture that bigger boat. And if we do need help, signal for some help to come. And all I can say is that this has become such an important imperative in our daily lives today. I mean, just take a look at the numbers that are being affected today. We're talking about over 380 infections. And what are these people going to do? They're going to have to self-isolate.
Yeah.
A lot of things can happen in self-isolation, man. So reach out, talk to someone, be in contact, ask that magic question, how are you? Is everything okay? Nowadays, I make it a point in my personal and commercial interactions, in my emails, first line, even though sometimes I forget it, I go like, oh, I need to cycle back. And I type in, how are you today? ? Then I start off with my other things. So it becomes a routine. It becomes a direction for a more caring environment. And I would say it's very much more likely to make us a more solid nation, a more solid world, where when I refer to solidarity of people, right? Because then I don't really have to, like I did this series, right, on mental well-being, Facebook live series on my profile, because I know a lot of people can't afford the prices that are out there, right? Including some of my prices. I mean, the average person wouldn't be able to afford my prices. So I'll have to give them education so that they can look, at least they have hope, and there are some ways by which they can do it. Just regularly practicing their own self-care routines, being aware of how they are feeling from a moment-to-moment basis, so that when push comes to shove, when they cross that line, okay, straight away they know that this is literally a matter of crossing from, stage 1 to who knows stage 4 in a day, in an instant. We don't know. So keep that in mind. And it is so important. If you're a parent, if you are a family member caring for somebody and you're feeling a little bit down right now, there are a lot of people who are experiencing it. It is normal to feel down. Seek some help. Just have a conversation with somebody. Escalate it as it goes along. Your friends can't handle it because they think that it's feeling it's tough. consider going to a professional and seek some help. If you're a friend and you know that somebody is facing some of these challenges, and you detect some of these difficult moments, they're constantly ruminating, they're constantly shut down. Their energy level last week is vastly different from this week because it's kind of like crashed. Then I think, my friends, you owe it to them to just approach them and say, hey, I might not be able to talk to you because I'm not an expert in this area. And to be fair, it is not your responsibility to be an expert in this area. Then you have to broach the subject. Would you like some help? Would you like me to recommend some people? And all I know is that there are a lot of good people out there, very kind, non-judgmental. They'll sit with you, they'll cry with you, they'll empathize with you. But there's only that special few who know exactly how to extract you from that darkness. It's not going to be easy sometimes. Sometimes it's a journey that you have to commit and decide to move on your own. But always recognize that that social support group is going to support you if you start preparing now, right? Get your counselors, get your coaches, get friends who can be confidants. Build solidarity by first contributing and saying, hey, how are you? Are you well? And then when you need it, they're probably going to be around for you as well.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing, Stuart. So you covered a lot. So I think there's for those who are watching this video, it is definitely up for replay. It will definitely be up available for to rewatch. And I just want to acknowledge Rajiv was here calling you Stuart the man. And Yongin was having a very long, because she's a teacher over here, so she's saying very informative sharing. Thank you for a detailed explanation on trauma and the ways to identify it. It's good that you recognize your energy and find ways to overcome it when the energy is low. While I do need the drive and enthusiasm, yes, you are right. A lot of teachers think too much of the well-being of their students until they neglect themselves. And in the end, they have mental problems, especially women teachers, and they have to still deal with their students. So very true on that. Thank you for sharing that, Yongin. So but we are, unfortunately, we are hitting an hour and a half. We already have passed it because we've
Time flies.
Time definitely flies when you're having fun. And of course, when it comes to Stuart itself, the knowledge that he has, it's very hard to contain it within an hour. It's very hard because there's just so much, especially when it comes to the human experience, that we really need to be careful for. Like I think you mentioned very earlier in the discussion that some people can like take 15 minutes to deal with a problem, some take 3 hours.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we need the passage of time still to deal with it. And in your case, of another example you mentioned, where you had a very traumatizing experience and someone shared with you that got you very disturbed. On that day, you were feeling very affected, but the following day, you were better. So it still needs the passage of time, chatting with different people, connecting, building up that network would really, really help out. So okay, so Stuart, if anybody wants to connect with you, all right. So really, again, I'm very, very appreciative of such deep sharing that you share with us. Where can people go to find you if they want to have a chat with you?
Well, I'd suggest you, the first place they can find me, the easiest place is Facebook, Instagram. I'm on most of social media. You can go to stuarttan.com. And also, if let's say anyone is interested, especially for those who are in business and you're attempting to get your mind straightened out so that you can scale your business and manage that from both a psychological as well as a process standpoint, and have a conversation with me first before anything else, because I think it's important to sort out what you want and be very clear about what your goals are. So there's a button somewhere on my website where you can click, fill up a simple form, and then I'll get in touch with you. But other than that, I would like to say this also in closing. There is a lot of shame associated with needing help, right? I hope that by me sharing with you that I'm also a client of therapy, right? I'm also a person who seeks out counseling very, very proactively because I know how powerful it can be. It literally makes a difference between a mature mind versus an immature mind sometimes. So if at any point of time you feel that sense of shame or insecurity or whatever, just stop. It is normal, and you have to acknowledge that you've got to also be compassionate towards yourself. That maybe that's one of the things that makes a distinction between you being able to benefit from the help versus resisting the help in the first place. right? So cut yourself some slack. If you do need help nowadays, especially, people understand. They're gonna want you back in shape. They're gonna want you bouncing back resiliently, and they will celebrate with you. Your friends will, your family members will, and if anything, I think now is the decade where people will literally applaud you for going for therapy, because they're gonna recognize that you are an incisive mind, right? You know yourself so well, so that you will be able to take action in such a maybe drastic form that creates the results that you need. So have that self-compassion. My heart goes out to all of you guys. If you are encountering some challenges, some difficulties, reach out first. If I can't help, I most definitely will have places where I can get you some help, right? Remember the national registries like Samaritans of Singapore, the National Council for Social Services, the Singapore Association for Counseling. There's an entire list, a registry of people whom you can actually also approach, right? So hang in there. Use this as a journey of development, because in my opinion, every down that you pick yourself up from is also a pattern that allows you to train resilience and to develop the capability of becoming stronger, not just because you want to show off or anything, but to know that you're assured that when bad times do strike, you have the capacity to see it through. And if you take a look at all past experiences, I'm pretty sure that has happened for you before. Allow yourself to work through it, if possible, with some good friends, if not with some professionals, and notice yourself and how differently you are after you have come out of that hole. You'll feel so much better about yourself because you've progressed, and you also have a lot more empathy for other people who need this help and support them. So in any case, thanks, Asher, for having me. I hope that this has enlightened some people, and that, if you can, this is going to be a different kind of pandemic, the pandemic of the mind, the virus of the mind that we need to stem. And we need to be able to share this set of messages to as many people as we can. So once the recording is up, in fact, this link, just share it with as many people as you can on your profiles, in your Instagram profiles, wherever, so that we can get the message out, so that we can help more people and develop this foundation of how are you? Is there anything that I can listen, anything I can contribute and listen to, right? Then we'll be able to form a better society, a better world in general.
Thank you so much. Great words, great closing words, and indeed just a simple "how are you" just to make us all human again, right? So thank you so much, Stuart, for your time. Really appreciate you. So yeah, thank you for your time. We'll catch you up in a while soon. Yeah.
All right, man. Good night.
Take care. All right, guys, thank you so much for your time. So right now, what we're going to do is that I'm just going to end the show. And thank you so much for sticking around together with me. Once more, if you haven't done so already, feel free to share this, as what Stuart has shared earlier, share this show over, on the Starting Million Show. And of course, if you haven't done so, follow me on YouTube and on Facebook here at It's Asher Au, right? I'm there. So just feel free to say hi and chat. And yes, thank you so much again once more for your time. So like Mark, thanks for an excellent session. To Stuart and Yongin as well. Thanks, Asher and Stuart, most for your sharing. It's mostly Stuart. I'm just here to look pretty. He's the one looking handsome. I'm the one looking pretty. So weird analogy, but okay, never mind. I said it, so I'll just leave it. Okay, so anyway, thank you so much for your time once more, and want to appreciate Stuart, every single one of you for taking your time, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.